Could you just tell your story
Mhm.
about, because you started out natural bodybuilder, you had some prominence in the field, you're on magazine covers and stuff like that, and then you took a diversion, you changed your life path. Could you just like briefly summarize that?
Okay, Jeff. Yeah. No, what I'll do is, one thing, I think we all come with certain gifts in life. We all have certain positives and negatives. Like I knew guys in my elementary school, you could see they were just A students, spend like 20 minutes doing their homework, and they were free to watch all the TV shows or to go play hide and seek or whatever the hell it was. And that would continue all the way through high school. And some of those guys ended up becoming engineers, doctors, all these guys that I knew. I wasn't one of those guys that was gifted in that intellectual department. Not that I wasn't handicapped by any means, but at the same time, I noticed that did not come as easy to me. And I could make the honor roll, and I could do well with that. But my fixation was almost like as a warrior of some sort. So I was always, the Van Damme films and the First Blood and Rocky and all, that stuff was just, that was where my passion was going, in the physicality, into, I guess I had a supreme attachment to some sort of warrior sort of past life or something, who knows what it was. And so when I started getting bullied, or, beat up or dragged across lunch tables in high school and stuff like that, then I started to develop the plan to deal with this war of life that was my teenage years, and I had a twin brother too. So what made it worse is, imagine if you're like in the army and you're trying to, snipe from a hill, but there's another guy there, so you're twice the size, so there's more targets, you know what I mean? So I couldn't hide. Right in high school, social life, it was like there's two of us, and they're like, hey, there he is. Oh, there he is again. Let's go. Right? It's like, because you're kind of like some sort of weird mutant that wanders around the high school when you're an identical twin, right?
Right.
So anyway, that's what started my weight training. And without getting too lost in that whole thing, I started lifting weights, and I was in martial arts, and so everything was about war and combat and stuff, and becoming the best I could at that to overcome the adversity that was in my life at that time. But of course, once you become a young adult and you get in a few bar fights and things start happening, you start to realize that, okay, this war path is not necessarily, a good way of being, right? I mean, there's a time for war, but it's not a good way of life, as far as let's just find another war to fight all the time.
Right.
So I started to realize I was fighting with myself somehow. And as I started to channel then my weight training and everything from battle more into a career, as far as competing, I started to become very prominent in the world. And that I was actually semi-famous in natural bodybuilding. I was like one of the most famous people in natural bodybuilding. Like I was sought after by photographers and stuff. I go down to the States and stuff. And I realized there was something missing in that life when I was down there. I could see that when I was in LA at the time, that, you could be, as my dad would say, dead in a pile. He has these weird Eastern sayings, right? Dead in a pile, right? Like you could be just alone somewhere on the street and nobody would give a crap about you. Like I realized there was something missing in that whole LA life. And I also noticed that as a drug-free bodybuilder, because that whole fitness industry is riddled with drugs and stuff, and I was in the drug-free natural side of things, it was very difficult to make any sort of living just being a natural person trying to be healthy. It was almost like it was this facade, that was going on. And somewhere along the lines, after struggling to make a living, trying to make it in that world, I started just to settle down and personal train. I got into sales for a period of time and everything, but I realized there was something in my life that was missing. Like every day at that time, I'd have people come up to me in the gym, or at least, one or two, and say, wow, I wish I looked like you, because I was at my elite results and stuff. But I remember I looked in the mirror one day, and I actually said, because I was so miserable, because I was like, where do I fit in this world? What's going on? Something about me is not fitting in the normal 9-to-5 thing, the normal, get a wife, have kids, and settle down, and a dog and a picket fence. Like that, all that stuff was not pleasurable to me. Literally, somebody could have dropped off a Ferrari in my front yard, said, Jason, here's the keys. It's yours. I'd be like, there was some kind of lifelessness. It's almost like a dangling piece of fruit, but it's been there for so long that it's just rotten on the branch. It's just ready to drop. That's what I felt like. There was something that was like tasteless in life. There was something missing. And when I said that to myself in the mirror, what happened was about 6 months later, I was playing hockey and I got I dislocated my shoulder. So basically it was a really serious dislocation, gone to emergency and everything. And that last thing that I was successful at, the bodybuilding thing, because everything else I was not the most successful at, but the last thing that got taken away from me. And that's when I started to look inwards and say, okay, what is the secret to life? What is this whole thing about? Now, this thing that I was really good at is taken away from me. Now what, right? So it was like the last little thread I had to cut between me and my attachment to the physical before I started to look to the eternal self. So I started to look at Qigong masters. I started to read books on shamanism, and all of it was very confusing because you'd read these books and they just talk about experiences they had. And so then you start to get entrained into this thing that I'm supposed to have certain experiences. And then you realize I'm not having those experiences. There's something wrong with me. What the hell, right? So it was almost like causing a problem in some way. And so I started to try certain exercises like meditation, and I'd be like, oh, close my eyes. I'm good. I see black. Big fucking deal. You know what I mean? like, what's the big deal with this? What the hell? This is stupid, right? You know? So like this shit doesn't work. You know what I mean? So I started to have that sort of tug of war because I wasn't taught the proper context of what is enlightenment and what is meditation, what is this stuff. So I was searching of what that all meant. But the truth is that the journey itself will produce the teacher. You know, once you're actually journeying, your yearning in your heart for truth will attract circumstances for truth. And at some point, I started to see this energetic healer. At least that's what I thought she was at the time. It turns out she was an actual very powerful spiritual guru known as Aratima. And I was getting these people talking to me that say, hey, there's this woman, you should really go see her if you're interested in the spiritual stuff. She's like quite different than some sort of hedge witch or psychic, right? Because my experience with psychics were all they did was give you, here's all your fucking problems, but I don't know what you're going to do about it.
Right.
And most of the time they weren't even correct about the problems, you know? So I found that stuff was not the path that I was looking for. There was something deeper. And when I went to see her for the first time, I had an experience of oneness with a person. And it was something, you know how abstract these spiritual experiences are. They're so difficult to explain. But it was an experience that I had never had before. Just by laying on the table and her doing a little bit of energetic healing, I felt like I was one with this person, and had nothing to do with emotions. It had nothing to do with like some sort of fascination with another human being. It just had to do with a experience that changed the paradigm through which I was experiencing life. And I was like, what the hell is that? And where's that been most of my life, right? So I started to, you know, long story short, I mean, there was a lot of back and forth, but long story short, I started to see her for sessions regularly just for energetic healing. And then she started to initiate me into certain things. And one thing she initiated me into was a Saraswati mantra. And the Saraswati mantra is the Sanskrit mantra for the goddess energy of knowledge. So she is also the governor of mantra itself. Saraswati is like she is the energy of voice, and vach, which is spiritual speech or speech that is based in truth, right? So a year later, a year passed, and I basically got sidetracked with life for a bit, and I didn't see the energetic healer for a while. I didn't see Aratima for a while. And what happened was, through some sort of series of weird events, a whole booklet and information of Sanskrit mantra and what it's about appeared to me. My brother just dropped it off on my bed and said, Jason, you know, you should take a look at this stuff. It's really interesting. I said, take that shit, shove it up here. You know what I mean? Because I was kind of stubborn at that point, you know. I would only take things through certain corridors, you know what I mean? Like, but if it was from my brother, that's it. It's bullshit. Like, I wasn't taking it, you know. So the brother rivalry. Well, anyway, he said, no, I spent $100 on this. Like, seriously, just look at this for a second. I think you're gonna get something out of it. And in that, the teachings that were in this book and CDs and stuff, they talked about the power of sound and how everything is vibration. And we know that with quantum physics, everything's vibration. The difference between a liquid and a solid is largely vibration and the space between the molecules and stuff. And it started to talk about, in the beginning was the word, let there be light, then there was light. So the word and the vibration is what created the light. It wasn't the light itself that came first. And in the whole spirituality and stuff, we have this fascination with light. But vibration is the source of where the light came from. So once I started to see that this is actually a science, it's nothing about religion. It's about, there are some people that just sat here for a long time, and as they just were here, they became hyper focused on reality, and certain sounds became apparent to them. And that's where the basis of Buddhism and Hinduism and some shamanism, and also the Sufis of the Islam tradition, like, this is where they learn this stuff. It wasn't through a religion where they made up a bunch of words. It was like they had realized something, just like I realized leaves on the tree just by watching the tree. And I started to just experiment, kind of like I did with lifting weights. It's like, oh, this is how you get bigger muscles. Okay, all right, I'll just do the exercises and see what happens, right? And so I thought, okay, let's just start chanting this mantra. I started using a luxury mantra, which is a mantra for abundance, because that was one of my biggest things in life, was that I was always struggling with money all the time. And so what happened was, Lakshmi has to do with abundance in all forms, and love being the most important, and connection, right? And what happened was, I was living in a town that was about 45 minutes away from the healer that I had been previously seeing, known as Aratima. Well, then what happened, I started chanting this mantra. Within 2 weeks, all of a sudden Aratima appeared in the same town as me, so I no longer had to commute. And that was my major excuse of why I'd stopped seeing her. I didn't want to drive a whole hour and whatever, and I don't have the money, whatever. Well, she showed up in somebody's basement, just doing sessions, because there were so many clients in this town that were interested in what she was doing. And somebody just said, hey, Jason, you know what? Remember, you weren't seeing Aratima anymore? Maybe you should go back to see her. She's actually just local now. So I said, okay, well, I guess it's just too damn convenient, and I'm going to take this as a sign. So I started seeing her some more. And successively, there was these many strange experiences that I couldn't explain that were life-changing. Like, she initiated me into the Ruparam Jyoti mantra. Now, this mantra is the light mantra that was realized by a guy named Swami Ramalingam, who turned his body into light. When she initiated me with that mantra, I walked around on a cloud for 2 weeks, and it was like I was on drugs. I was like, everything feels so pleasant. What the hell is going on? And my girlfriend at the time was looking at me. She goes, what's wrong with you? Because she was used to me being more of a fiery, irritated kind of guy. But also I was like, just mellowed right out. She's like, did you just come out of the psych asylum, or what the hell do you? I remember sitting at sushi, just eating. She goes, this is so weird. You're so weird right now. What's wrong? So as I started getting happier, she started getting more irritated, right? She's like, I'm used to that irritated guy. I want that guy to be around, right? So anyway, a lot of crazy experiences started happening, which showed that there was a science of experience. And I started to get attached to these experiences, like most spiritual students, right? They started, oh, I like that experience. I want that again. I want that. I want another one of those, right? And what happened was, the experiences would always change. It was almost like whack-a-mole, right? Where it's like, you want this one over here, then the mole pops up over here, and it's different stuff, right? So you could never really get a template of, oh, spirituality is this experience. Oh no, it's this experience, it's that experience. And finally, at the end of this period of time, where at Atim and it became very apparent that I was more like a disciple than an actual client. And I was like, okay, I finally understood. I started researching gurus in India and just different stuff, and bhakti. Bhakti is the devotion path and stuff. And her and I finally became a couple. But it was like almost like a modern day ashram, where this gave me a way to be able to keep studying with her, but on a 24/7 sort of like Rocky Balboa path. You know what I mean? Where you're with coach all the time. Like, here you are, drink the raw eggs and stuff. And so there was other things that were revealed to me once I became this spiritual student teacher thing became part of my daily pattern. Because when shit gets personal, that's when the real work starts. And a lot of times people like to be butterflies and just stop on the flower and then leave. Oh, nice scent of the flower, then leave. That's most of their spiritual path, right? But they're not willing to get consumed by the frog and then be transformed into, frog poop and then maybe something else from that. That's really more the spiritual journey. And that's what became apparent to me. And one day through this process, and I talk about cleansing on my channel, about what spiritual cleansing is and stuff, and all these different emotions and these feelings that I thought were me. These are my feelings. These are my thoughts. These are my points of view. This is who I am. All that stuff just started getting discarded. And then one day it all imploded, and I went, poof. And it was like the Matrix, where when the Neo takes the red pill and all of a sudden the mirror goes like this, all of reality just went, and then I went bang, and I just expanded right into everything. And it never left since. It was like I turned inside out, and now I'm more outside than I am inside. There's not this hard shell known as Jason, like like the candy coating of the Reese's Pieces or whatever, where there's this hard shell of I, and then everything opposite is I. It's like, no, there was this collective agreement of I, which was a much different thing that emerged. And from that, another process or another journey began. But that is when I realized that, oh, spirituality wasn't about the experiences, although they can happen. It was about who is experiencing it, about the dissolution of that, so that the true one can become a part of this experience known as incarnation.